I want to talk a little bit about dot spacing. I've gotten a lot of questions about this, and it's not exactly the easiest answer to provide, as there are quite a number of things that can affect your dot's spacing. I want to go over a couple of these with you tonight. Number one, to keep your dots close together without them actually touching, you first want to ensure that your paint is the right consistency. Now, in this Tuesday tip, I'm not going to be going over exactly the right consistently and how to achieve that. Look for some other future releases on that. However, your consistency is going to play a very big part in how your dots are placed and how the tools react to them. So make sure that you're, again, checking your consistency first. Number two, when you are dotting, attempt to hold and lower your tool straight down. Do your best to look down right over your project, right over your tools, or get the best angle so that you can see exactly where your paint is going to land on your surface. Number three is a little bit more difficult because it is going to require lots of practice. You need to know your tools and their specific loading techniques. Tool sizes vary quite widely by brand and type. The loading of the tool and the pressure in which you are using to place your dots also makes a very big impact, and you're going to need to understand all four of these things in order to place consistent dots each and every time. So again, you're going to want to make sure that you've practiced enough to understand what size dot is going to be created, which each size tool, each type of tool, and each technique that you're going to use. If you're going to use a flat-headed tool, these are going to be things like the acrylic rods. If you're going to use a DIY tool, this might be something like the head of a nail or a push pin, something like that. Tools like maybe even Mark's Mandalas, they have the flat tip. These, and you lower them down, you will see that the paint can easily push out over the edge of the tool, especially if your paint is on the thinner side. If you're loading these tools up with lots of paint, or sometimes even if you've added a medium, these things can make the end dot larger than your tool size. Now, if your paint is actually on the thicker side, maybe you've not loaded your tool up enough. Or if you're going to use the ball-headed tools, like the nail art tools, you will notice that the dot is going to be smaller than the tool size, especially when it comes to the ball-headed tools. Keep in mind, the ball heads are measured by circumference at its largest point, which is in the middle of the ball, not the tip that we actually use to touch the surface with. So again, this is going to take a lot of practice to determine what size the dot versus the tool size will be. And again, we're looking at consistency. Thicker paint will make a smaller dot because it's not going to spread. Number four is you want to make sure to teach yourself better spacing, lots of practice, and make sure you slow down. When you are painting, we talk a lot about kissing the surface. This means you want to lower your tool to the point where the tip of the paint drop touches the surface, but the tool does not. Your paint should not have broken the surface connection with the tool and the surface, so it's going to be kind of hovering in between. When you're in this state, don't automatically place the dot, meaning do not just push down and pull up. Use your tool in this kind of hovered space to move slightly as needed to make any corrections in spacing. Number five, keep a close eye on how things are progressing. Watch your symmetry. You do need to make adjustments as soon as possible. Don't be afraid in these instances to remove whole sections, rows, or even the whole project if needed, because with the symmetry of a mandala, one misplaced dot, especially near the center, can potentially throw off the symmetry of your whole thing. Number six, this especially applies if you are using a tutorial. Maybe you're watching a YouTube, maybe you're trying to follow a pattern of someone else's. If you're going to run into dots that are simply too far apart, where your spacing has a lot of negative space in between, what you're going to find is that dots that are too far apart, or if your dots are too large, you're going to end up overlapping other dots. In some instances, you might even run the design right off the edge of your surface. On the other side, if your dots end up being too close together, if your dots are too small, like I said, maybe you're following a pattern and you don't exactly have the right size, or you're not loading your tool up enough, you're too small with the dot. In this situation, you're going to be leaving too much space between your dots. And similarly here, you may actually end up overlapping other dots within the pattern because you've run out of room in one area or you've used too much in another. Number 7, understand, quite honestly, that this takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot to understand how to gauge what tool size is correct and how to place the dots consistently each time, especially if you're not going to be following an exact pattern with the exact tools as the presenter. Don't let this dissuade you, but again, dot spacing does not have an exact answer for how. You do need to make sure that each of these prior items is in place so that you have the best consistency to move forward with. Thank you so much for joining me today for another Tuesday tip, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.